Cobra! La 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 la!
And that sound means it's the start of another Missal for the masses. This is the Chaps Assistance Motor Pod, and this is the podcast centered around the vehicles, playsets, trailers, and comic books from the G.I. Joe, a real American hero toy line from 1982 to the present day. But we also talk about other military and adventure toy lines as we seem fit, like Delta 17, Robo Skull, and all the other offerings in the action figure community. And I'm your host, Gary. And with me, as always, is
Casey, podcast from the pit.
And good evening, Casey. Thanks once again for joining. And tonight, let's begin with what's new in your life of collecting over the past week.
Due to some financial setbacks, I had to cancel a lot of pre-orders. That's how my collecting is going right now.
Oh,
but
man,
I did get orders in for the Duke and the Serpentor from Super 7.
Yeah, I am really excited about the Super 7 Ramar and Fatal Fluffies. I'm going to contact my local comic shop to see if he got those on order for me, because I don't want to end up with 4 sets of Wave 2. But I think, and I know I'm not alone in the fact that I kind of want to have a couple Fatal Fluffies to hang out with my Dreadnoks. And your dog seems to like, I could go for some Fatal Fluffies too.
She probably could.
That's the biggest toy item in both of our lives of collecting. I think with that quick summary, we can talk about our main topic of this evening, and that is...
She was trying to tell you it's the Cobra F.A.N.G.
From 1983. The F.A.N.G. is one of those forced acronyms from the G.I. Joe line. F.A.N.G. standing for Fully Armed Negator Gyrocopter. And according to the box, it also has with movable rotor blades and cannon, does not shoot. So, Casey, you want to go through the box art description?
It's your typical early 80s G.I. Joe action picture with the explosion background that at I would have been 11 found awesome, and at 52 I still find awesome. I love the F.A.N.G. Had it as a child, one of my favorites, and one of the first Cobra vehicles I picked up after I started collecting again.
The art has a Cobra Trooper manning the stick. It's, like you said, beautiful Hector Garrido art. We're taking a look at its left side, and yeah, it's just a good painting of the toy itself. Really, you got the exhaust coming out the engine in the back, and you got little action lines for it flying forwards with the blades rotating, and yeah, it's one of those great early 80s art pieces.
I mean, art like this just sold toys. Even if you just walk into a toy store and see that, you're going to want that.
Yeah, and it really makes you want to open the box and get it, grab it, and play with it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I also like it on the underneath the G.I. Joe logo. It says G.I. Joe, and then underneath that it says a Cobra Command Weapon. So it doesn't say G.I.
Oh,
Joe, a
yeah.
real American hero. It just says Cobra. And then you have the big logo Cobra enemy with the Cobra sigil.
Yeah. I always like that.
So you flip the box over, you see the back panel for actual size. And we get a picture of the prototype F.A.N.G viewed from the right. And Cobra F.A.N.G, based on Cobra Command's top secret designs, F.A.N.G is their newest advanced weapons system. Use it to help the evil enemy army of Cobra Command battle G.I. Joe. So, going around the box, we have a movable main rotor, super realistic detail, sturdy construction for rugged play, 4 removable rockets, foot pegs support Cobra figures, unique Cobra design, 1 removable negator bomb, 30 millimeter swivel cannon, realistic engine detail, movable tail rotor, and advertising. Actual size when assembled, snap together assembly, no tools, no glue. I mean, this was still, very early on in the line. That's definitely a selling point for the toy line.
Oh, yeah.
Detailed battle prints inside. These exciting blueprints explain fully how a real F.A.N.G would operate. Add them to your Cobra Command file. And 2 flag points.
Yeah. I was looking at that. I was thinking, I know for the price, did it say how much this cost back then? Because I don't think it was much more than a figure, was it?
According to yojoe.com, it was $3.19 MSRP. So that is, what is that, about 70 cents more than a figure in 1983 dollars?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think that's a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking at the back of the box again and looking at the prototype, the biggest thing that I see that's different is the back nub for the figure in the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
And, just a couple things here and there. Not really too different from my point of view. What do you think?
And I'm trying to look. That might be about it, which would be weird because we always find several differences.
No, pretty faithful. That's a sign that it was pretty ready to go from the get-go. It looks a little bit like the rotor system is a little bit different than my F.A.N.Gs that I have out in my collection, but really, yeah, it's really close to the final product.
Yeah, I'd say it's real close. Maybe the stick's a little different. Like the one on the back looks thicker than the one I'm sitting here looking
Yep.
at. Pretty faithful.
And it looks like the bomb's a little forward,
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
but really, yeah, no, it's so really and a good example of what you see is what you're getting.
Yeah, played a ton out of the F.A.N.G when I was a kid.
So I didn't have a F.A.N.G until my adult self. All right, let's go in. What did you use your F.A.N.G for? What was your play imagination like?
Mostly strafed Joes as they were on the ground. Uh, Once I got the Dragonfly, this was no, in my opinion, it wasn't comparable to the Dragonfly. I'd have to have a few of these, and my parents weren't about to buy me more than one of the toy. They didn't understand the brilliance of troop building.
A lot of parents did not do that. Maybe if you got older and you could trade, a friend, be like, "Oh, I don't
Yeah,
want my Joe toys," and then you're like, "Ooh, I can use a couple extra troopers and F.A.N.Gs."
I mean it was like that with everything. Though one stormtrooper, one Cobra officer, one Cobra trooper.
Yeah.
I mean, hey.
But you said so it wasn't, so it was more of a ground attack for you.
Yeah, it would attack Joe's on the ground. It would be flying. So it was air to ground.
And it didn't hold a candle to the dragonfly. The dragonfly would just swoop in and blow it out of the sky.
And I got the Sky Striker. I'm like, it's not matching up with that either. So, but I always have love for the F.A.N.G because deep down, I guess I'm more Cobra than Joe, if I'm being honest. And the F.A.N.G holds, some real sentimental value for me.
Yeah. My childhood with the F.A.N.G is entrenched in Sunbow. So this was the utilitarian helicopter for the Cobra forces. They get blown out of the sky and they parachute to safety. I don't really remember it much from the comic book. Again, I didn't start reading the comic book to issue 101. So at that point, the F.A.N.G 2 is out, which I have more positive memories of. But again, it's a toy I didn't get till I was an adult. Yeah, to me, this was just the Cobra helicopter. My young childhood self was just like, this thing was. I didn't also have the pleasure of owning one as a kid, so that affects my opinion
Oh,
of it.
oh yeah. I mean, it's the sentimental value of anything you have as a kid. Like if I talk about Master of the Universe, I don't have a lot of fond memories about the later figures because I didn't have them. Because after a few years, it was nothing but Joe. So I don't have, memories of later figures. So, yeah, I mean, the ones you had as a kid are always going to be more special to you.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of Motu. I
Yeah.
had battle armor He-Man, the one where you strike the chest and it would flip,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a few others. I remember at the end I got Hordak and I got the Tyrannosaurus Rex
Oh,
at the very end.
yeah. You'll wish you had that still. That's worth a lot of money.
I know, I found that out during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh yeah, let me just see what the other toy lines are going for the things that I had as a kid, and I was just like, oh my god,
Oh,
I think I sold that in a trunk of toys for $20 in 2002.
somebody
So
got lucky.
yep. Yeah, well, it's all I can offer you is $20. Well, it's like, well, it's $20 more for my college textbook.
All right. $20, $20.
Yeah, at that point, yeah. So we'll get a little more into the opinions of our adult selves on the F.A.N.G after we go through the blueprints. And the F.A.N.G fully armed negator gyrocopter has 17 beautiful talking points about it. Regular listeners, in case you know that I've been on a helicopter kick, but this is a gyrocopter, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a little bit. But let's start with number one. We are looking at the front view of the F.A.N.G. So we're looking at it from the front, and on either side to the port and starboard by the head of your pilot, you get the carburetor air intake ducts. So drawing fresh air into the engine. Also interesting that it's a carburetor. So that to me suggests a piston engine. The engine mold does not look like a piston engine. It looks more to me like a turbine engine. That's something to see. But the other thing too, going into a gyrocopter, is a lot of those are light helicopter. Well, essentially like a light helicopter. And I think the most famous gyrocopter is from the 1982 action movie Road Warrior, piloted
Ooh,
by Bruce Spence, the gyro captain. And that uses a small piston engine, like a lawnmower engine, to fly off. So I can see with a gyrocopter why it has a carburetor.
yeah. I would think the most famous one would be Little Nelly from the James Bond movie. Was it Thunderball? He had a little gyrocopter. It was pretty
Ooh.
cool.
So, Casey, do you think I should make that a poll for this episode on Spotify?
I would say yes
Which is the more famous gyrocopter?
if I could actually remember which movie it was in. It was in one of the original James Bonds with Sean Connery, one of the early ones.
Oh, it wasn't a Roger Moore?
No.
Casey, you have a little bit of homework to do on
Yeah.
Sunday when you're sleeping.
I want to say Thunderball, but
That is going to be a poll. So if you're on Spotify, you can answer the poll. Which is the more famous gyrocopter? You'll get all the details at the end of the show when I try to get you guys to subscribe and interact with the podcast. Okay, so go to number 2 on the blueprint, cooling system exhaust ducts. So that's basically these little ports, I guess you could say, on, again, left and right, port and starboard of the F.A.N.G. I would say they are behind your pilot's hips, little round circular ports. So that's a neat little detail on the side of the F.A.N.G. And then we'll go to number 3, the high-speed fiber reinforced main rotor. So that's your rotor.
mm-hmm.
And then we get to number 4, the 30 millimeter rapid fire cannon. So that's the little red gun that's on the ball mount at the very tip of the
Yep.
F.A.N.G. So I've always found, well, it's part number 16. We'll just jump real quick. It's mounted to the remote nose mounted bubble turret. Now, real quick, Casey, is your bubble like stiff or is it like loose and floppy?
It's not floppy at all.
Is that your
Moves
vintage one?
well. Yeah.
I have 2 vintage F.A.N.Gs. One of them is loose and one of them is stiff.
Yeah, this one's good shape.
So I guess it depends on how much the child played with it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really neat feature being
It
able
is.
to go anywhere in that, in that rotation. That's it's just a novel idea. I just wonder, with that system, and this is a tiny little helicopter, where do they fit the ammunition for that 30 millimeter cannon?
Good question.
So, it's got to have a belt feed somewhere. And this is where, I hate mentioning it because I'm not really collecting it, but if this made it into the classified line,
They would have an part.
yeah, they'd figure it out.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it should make it into the classified line. And it will at some point.
All right. So we've already got a few vehicles in the classified line. Let's do another quick fire. You got the Ferret, you've already got the Stinger. Of course, we got the Hiss and the Rattlers on the way. Now we have the Claw also on the way with a pilot.
Trouble bubble.
The Trouble Bubble, that's right. So, but the F.A.N.G. is omitted. Do you think the F.A.N.G. has been, how do you say, unfairly overlooked or unfairly put at the back of the line so far?
Oh yeah, it should have been out already. Should have been out before Trouble Bubbles.
I agree.
And if they're gonna go out and they're giving everybody the Rattler, which the Rattler's cool, but the Fang's cool. You can get a couple of them that look better.
I will say I agree with the Ferret being out as early as it was, but I think the F.A.N.G. should have been number 2 if it wasn't number 1 for small vehicles for Cobra.
Right. Perfect non-HasLab. Perfect non-HasLab.
Perfect. Agreed. Perfect non-HasLab. Okay. So again, we're comparing it to other Cobra vehicles. You're Mr. Cobra. You said it yourself. F.A.N.G. or Trouble Bubble?
F.A.N.G.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And to me, the other thing is the F.A.N.G. For me, I have, as an adult, it's less imagination. It's like, oh, it's a helicopter, gyrocopter.
Yeah. But as you pointed out, though, whereas I mean, you guys suspend reality because there's really no place for ammunition, but you need that ammunition, so it's there somewhere.
It's there somewhere. That's right. So, but I don't have to spend my disbelief as much as the Trouble Bubble, which to me is the Fastball Express.
I like the Trouble Bubble, but
I like the
F.A.N.G.
Trouble Bubble too,
F.A.N.G.
but
all the way.
yeah. We go on to number 5, the LCD analog instrumentation. So that's basically the gauge stickers that's facing for the pilot. And then you get number 6, which is in the same area, the secondary flight controls, which again is on the sticker. I don't see why they needed to have 2 things for it, but they did. But then, of course, you got to point out the 7, the in quotes joystick primary flight controls. All right. And then we get number 8, the heat seeking air to air rockets. So, Casey, this had some air to air capability against your
Dragonfly.
yeah. But did you use those rockets against the Dragonfly?
I'd probably already lost the rockets when I got my Dragonfly.
Yeah, the rockets sit on some of the daintiest of tabs in the entire G.I. Joe line.
Yeah, I just had 2 fall off when I was trying to show it to you a while ago.
It doesn't take much stress to flex it and for them to pop off. But I love the rockets on this thing. I think they're perfectly they run the length of the runners. They pop in that beautiful red.
Red, black, and gray. That's a combination that's hard to beat.
Yeah, it's the Cobra way.
Yep.
We go to 9, the airspeed engine RPM sensors, which is these little, round things near the bottom of the rotor and, like right on the main shaft. And then we get to number 10, the engine perimeter frame roll bar. That's that red piece of plastic that is almost always broken on everybody's F.A.N.G.
I have a slight crack in mine, and it's worrisome.
The red plastic syndrome is real on this. I have one roll bar that's complete, but it is separated in 2 places. So I gave up on having my quote unquote perfect F.A.N.G. I mean, it was just like these things are dainty, but they do make reproduction roll bars or perimeter frame roll bars on eBay, so you can buy them made a little bit differently, so they complete the look without being broken.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
We get to number 11, the muffler housing, which really is just this cylindrical thing that goes into the number 12, the engine exhaust nozzle. That is something that is found on a turbine motor. And then we get to 13, the rear horizontal stabilizers. And then we get 14, the high-speed counter rotator. So when I was looking up gyrocopter things on YouTube tonight, the one thing I didn't see a gyrocopter with was the counter rotor, the counter rotation rotor.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And there's a reason for that.
Doesn't work.
Because the counter rotator is designed to work in conjunction with a powered main rotor to counteract, the physics of the fact that the blade is going to want to turn the helicopter all the time. So this is really telling me, this really isn't a gyrocopter. Again, forced acronyms.
Right.
15 is, you got to point out the fleet identification number. So the F.A.N.G. is part of the 76 X3-6.
Yep.
So, the 76 X3 brigade of F.A.N.G. helicopters. You can probably get stickers that change it from 1 to 10 or something. And let's see, we go to the 16, which we covered. And then 17, this is interesting. You don't see this often. Specifications: weight, 2,200 pounds. That's a little over a ton. And then you have speed, 197 miles per hour, and with a 550-mile range. And you know what they didn't point out? They didn't point out the bomb that goes on the belly of the F.A.N.G.
This is Cobra. We're supposed to be all about weapons.
And this thing is heavily armed. It is definitely like a, to borrow the Japanese term, a chibi helicopter. It's a little bit smaller because, this is a toy, but it's a little bit shrunken in proportion. In real life, the helicopter would be a little bit bigger, for a single seater. It's about the size of a gyrocopter, like a small gyrocopter. But there's a lot of helicopter features, and that's why I don't buy it as a gyrocopter.
I mean, if they're telling me it's a gyrocopter, it's a gyrocopter.
I had to look up how a gyrocopter works tonight. And really, the way a gyrocopter works is the blades are powered by the forward movement of the gyrocopter. So they're tilted in such a way that the air, moving through the gyrocopter creates, wind resistance, which rotates the blades, which then with the rotation of the blades provides the lift. Right. Like, really interesting concept. It's simple in a lot of ways because now that the rotors aren't being powered by the engine, you don't need the extra, rotor in the back to counteract the helicopter rotors. So it's really a simpler design for a lightweight aircraft. I've never imagined it as a true gyrocopter as a kid, as an adult. It's always been a helicopter with a powered rotor. It's just a little mini helicopter for the Cobra forces.
Right.
Exposed cockpit because safety be damned.
Cobra does not have OSHA.
No, they don't. Yeah, Cobra safety, huh?
Last.
To me, this is an iconic image. It's an iconic toy of that early era of G.I. Joe. To me, it screams Sunbow. It was in the comic books in the early issues, and then it kind of faded out after, they didn't need to sell F.A.N.Gs anymore at the toy store. But, it's just the use for me in the cartoon is just, what accelerates this thing to the top of my must-have G.I. Joe toys.
Now, we have seen its used so far in the Energon universe, though.
That's right. Limited because there's really not too much Energon universe. But yeah, the first 2 issues of G.I. Joe, if I remember correctly.
Duke borrowed one. After he kicked somebody out of it.
That's right. So maybe that's a sign of it coming to classified in the near future.
You never know. I mean, there's always hope.
Yeah, I have not kept up on my classified news.
Me either.
For me, this is the perfect light aircraft for Cobra forces. It pairs well with the other stuff that they have in their arsenal at this time. You got the trouble bubble, it works with the claw, and it's part of their limited air capabilities at this stage in the toy line.
When I was a kid, it was H.A.N.G. H.A.N.G. You have both of them. You attack your Joes with your his tank and your F.A.N.G. helicopter. The one disappointing thing about the F.A.N.G. for me, and it was only after I got back into collecting, is I got the Mamba and the helicopter pilot, the gyro Viper. I thought, man, that's a perfect pilot for the F.A.N.G. So I got an extra one for that. And it doesn't fit in there because the backhaul doesn't line up right.
Oh no.
I was like, that's the perfect pilot for that.
And that's a shame too. It really is such a good, helicopter. Because for me, it is like every Cobra minion can get the F.A.N.G. It's like the F.A.N.G. is part of, Cobra orientation. It's like on day one, welcome to Cobra. Day two, okay, here's your training on to drive the ferret, to drive the F.A.N.G., to operate the claw. It's like one of those like you're gonna have to use this anyway, guys. So here we go. It's like in orientation.
It's like the Joes and Sky Strikers.
So yeah, exactly. So I have no problem. I have a night creeper hanging out on my desk, and he fits he fits. He doesn't look out of place. It's
Mm-hmm.
what is that? 7 years removed, 6, 7 years
Yeah,
removed,
easily. Yeah,
and it's it's a perfect fit. I really don't see too many Cobras not belonging in it. Obviously you found that the Gyro Viper does not physically fit, but like you said, he looks good. He
yeah.
looks the part, especially with the helmet.
Mm-hmm. I was like, here's my whole air strike force. I got my Mamba, got my Gyro Vipers with that, one for each. And I was like, put a Gyro Viper with backhoe just did not line up right.
But with the whole other thing, with you mentioning the other helicopters and the other aircraft, the F.A.N.G. can be considered like multi-use once you add the rest of the GI Joe line to it. It can
Mm-hmm.
be like a scout helicopter. Like for the Joes, I call, that to me, that's the 1990 Locust. That's what the
Yeah,
Joes would use the Locust for. That's what I think Cobra would use the F.A.N.G. for. Scout get in, get out, and then, send in the Mambas, send in the Rattlers after that. But the F.A.N.G. can be used as like a scouting or advance aircraft.
yeah. I mean, there's no limit to what you can do with the F.A.N.G. You just need more than one if you're going to attack something real big.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a small vehicle. And the great thing about the GI Joe small vehicles is usually when they were new, they were cheap enough to be able to amass an army and to create the dioramas. But, in our child minds, you just imagine that you have like 4 or 5 of them
Mhm.
attacking the headquarters. And then when the one you're holding blows up, oh, look, here's the other one.
Here's the next one.
So it really is. I can see, you attacking the 1983 headquarters with this, the 1992 headquarters. It's just an awesome helicopter. And like you said, put it next to the Mamba. The Mamba, it dwarfs it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's not out of place.
Nope. I love the F.A.N.G. Always have. Always will.
So, and we know the F.A.N.G. has been re-released through the years and really hasn't seen a lot of too much retooling, even in the 25th line when they gave it like a more fancy joystick in 2008. You have the most recent one, Casey.
I do. When Hasbro came out with their retro line, uh, honestly, it might be blasphemy, but I like it better. If you look at it, like the joystick is better. You got leg holes in here, mostly because it's for the 4-inch figures. But just the all round shape of it is, to me, cooler. It doesn't have those roll bars, thank goodness, that always break. It's like they've got some cable.
And he added some detail behind the little
Oh yeah,
machine gun ball.
yep, looks really cool. Plus I think the motor, or the, was that turbine? I'm not really
Yeah.
I think that's looks really good.
Yeah, it looks like the only real difference on that is it looks like the tail section's shorter.
It is, yes, for sure.
And the rotors, are the rotors about the same length? Or are they a little, or is the main rotor a little smaller?
It's just a little bit smaller, but it has better designs. If you look at the top,
Looks good.
I would say the bottom, all the missiles look pretty much the same.
All right. Have you tried putting a vintage figure in it and a vintage O-ring in it?
I have not. The only figure I've ever had in this is the, I don't know, the pilot that came with it, but his arm broke off, so I don't have anything in him right now.
Oh, that's yeah. Well, that speaks a little bit for Hasbro quality then, unfortunately, in the 2021.
Yeah, I couldn't get it to bend, and I was like, heated it, then it snapped.
Yeah, you having that makes me kind of want to get one and open it up
I like them.
and experiment with it.
Yeah,
And they're still cheap enough.
yeah.
Yeah, they're still like what, $25?
Probably get them cheaper than that. Yeah.
Yeah, the vintage F.A.N.Gs, they're not cheap.
No, especially if they're in good condition.
The 30 millimeter cannon tip, I've had a few of those that were broken. I've had skids that were broken. I know the skids are an absolute pain to change out. I watched a retro blasting video on how to do that, and it looked like he struggled a little bit with it. He was successful, but it wasn't, it wasn't just plug and play, snap out, snap on thing. And then, really the biggest thing with this is I don't see too many tabs breaking on the skids and for the missiles that hold the missiles on. But the only thing really is that roll bar. It's that roll bar that breaks on all the vintage ones. And really not much else. I mean, it's pretty sturdy otherwise.
Oh, another difference is there's no foot pegs on the skids.
On the retro one. Okay.
Yeah. But that's not safe anyway.
Well, I mean, you never know when you might have to carry somebody out, and just tell them to keep their head down so they don't get.
Right. They're going to lose that head.
So we've talked about play. We've talked about the features. I mean, you got to give it a credit. The mold, has a lot of detail in it with, little rivets or screw, areas for where the panels line up on the fuselage. The engine has wonderful detail on the bottom. It looks like a real mini helicopter. There's really it's just a solid toy.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing is it's kind of a little bit, I got to say, I think it's still a little bit fragile, 41 years later.
Yeah. Especially that roll bar. I'm sitting there looking at it more and more now, and it's ready to give way right in the corner.
Yep. Yeah, it was meant to be under a little bit of stress when assembled. So it's been, brittle plastic does not like stress. It's kind of like the tow cable on a Wolverine. Anything else to add?
Just, like I said, hours and hours of my childhood was spent playing with the F.A.N.G. So, and my dog agrees. It's awesome.
Yeah. Your dog's like, I had one when I was a puppy too.
She's about that old now.
So I'll go first. I'll let your rose tinted glasses rate it last. On a scale of 0 to 5, using quarter scales, to me, this is like a 4.75 out of 5 GI Joe toy. I think every collector needs it in their collection. I think the 83 version is just iconic. It is the only thing, the only thing that makes it near perfect is the fact that it's the roll bar, if you want a nice complete one, that's a brittle part. So you're going to probably want to display it with a reproduction, and just, you have to get a good example, and then you just have to keep it a good example. Other than that, I think every GI Joe collector, a GI Joe O-ring collector, or that, needs one in their collection.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I was going to give it a 4.5, but I would go 4.75. It's, like I said, hours of my childhood. It's still to this day one of my favorite vehicles, and it's one of the smallest, most inexpensive vehicles when it came out. So one of my favorites. I can't help but sit here and spin the rotors when we're talking.
No, it's a very like fidget friendly toy. You mentioned that. No, I'm spinning my rotors too. And they do, and they just work.
Out of the retro though, I mean the rotors are still looking really good. Where mine are droopy on the original.
But you can fix the droop. Mine, one of mine, you can see has a little bit of a turn up instead of a droop from the way it was stored.
Yeah, I've got one up and one down.
Yeah.
On mine.
I also appreciate the no step decals on the rotors. I think they had some left over from the Sky Striker. So like puts them on the F.A.N.G.
It's a great toy. There's no, if they pull one out in classified, I'll probably buy it.
Yeah, one thing we didn't discuss was his tank driver. On his file card, he's also listed as the F.A.N.G. pilot.
Yeah, didn't know that.
If the his driver is a F.A.N.G. pilot, if they release the F.A.N.G. in classified, and if they do, they will include a driver, because it's more toyetic to include a driver with a vehicle. Do you think that they would do a redecoed his driver?
Yeah, the driver that came out with the retro one looked kind of like a his driver, except he was like blue and had some black to him. He was a good looking figure. But like I said, the arm snap made me mad. Just kind of put it in a Jordan. I don't even know where I kept it now.
So I got a great email the other day, and I wanted to share. And this one's from Danny Derryberry. He sent in an email to chaplainjoepod@gmail.com. And he goes, "Hey, Gary, just wanted to drop a line. I discovered your show through Joburg, spurred on by my 7-year-old Gunner and his lament of my lost, given away, destroyed collection. We went to the local vintage shop about a year ago. Several eBay purchases later and a Dallas show with Larry Hama, we are completely ate up with it. Thanks for your reliable show. It helps as a stand-in for childhood friends that surrounded this hobby. Keep up the great content." And Danny, thank you for that email. Something like that. I'm glad we're helping you rekindle your joy for G.I. Joe. And thanks to Joburg for, pimping this podcast. So always glad to, grab onto their coattails.
Oh, yeah.
Not as much as Podcast from the Pit, because, I borrowed their host.
Joburg is one of the first podcasts when I started collecting, and they really like got me wanting to get into collecting that. And I don't know if you ever Do you remember a podcast called the Foul Card Podcast?
Yep.
Two brothers from West Virginia, I think.
Yep.
And I loved their show. I would actually love to interview them if I can ever get a hold of them. I tried to reach out, but no response.
Yeah. Well, one day things will pop back up. You never know. People do come back. Form BX257's back after 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great thing. It is a community. People walk away, but they come back when they're ready to rekindle their conversations or share what's going on in their collections. So that's always good. The Stalwarts, What's on Joe Mind, Full Force podcast, those guys have been around a long time. I mean, the list goes on and on. It'd be a shame to keep mentioning names because you're going to forget some.
Right.
Order
There's
of Battle,
so many,
Anything Joe's, Joe on Joe, Talking Joe.
so many people do so many great things, and I love that. They're all not carbon copies of each other. Like
Yeah.
Chaplin's Assistant Motor Pod is not like Anything Joe's, Order of Battle, Joe Berg, Audible Interlude. They're all different, and they're all good.
Yeah. And they all bring something different to listen to.
Mhm.
So, I like the fact when Audible Interlude does their role-playing episodes. So, I mean, yeah, everybody does something a little bit different. It's fun.
Yep.
So, well, on that note, that concludes this Missal for the Masses. This has been the Chaplain Sisters Motorpod, and thank you for listening. The Chaplain Sisters Motorpod is hosted by Spotify for podcasters and is also found on many of the other popular podcatchers. Please like, share, review, comment, or otherwise interact with them, as it only helps to improve and grow this podcast. For more Chaplain Sisters Motorpod, you can find me on social media at Chaplain Joe Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and X. I've really stepped up posting on Instagram and X lately just to really just get more engagement and just to share my love of the action figure hobby. And then, like Danny did, you could also just send an email to chaplainjoepod@gmail.com.
And if you want to get a hold of me, you can check me out with my friends on Podcast from the Pit on YouTube. You can send us the email at podcastfromthepit@gmail.com. We've got a pretty good Facebook group, and we do have an X account and Instagram. Mostly we do Instagram. We don't do a lot on X. That's us.
And the Chaplain Sisters Motorpod is a strange, but not estranged, nerdy little brother of the pint, a pop culture podcast. And with all of that said and done, one final missile for the masses. Be decent to each other.
Good night. Take care, everybody.